For our COBT viewers and listeners, it's Maynard, Mike, and Arjun here with something spectacular. We've got former Senator Mary Landrieu from Louisiana. She was a 3-term senator, well-regarded, centrist, expert on energy issues, and someone that has always put public policy at the top of her list in terms of stating her views on what's best for the country. She's got some great things to share with us. She's also the co-chair of Natural Allies, the Leadership Council there. We'll get into that, but you'll hear Natural Allies. They talk a lot about the role of natural gas and how it can work with renewables and is a huge part of our climate and national security goals. Mary, we are so lucky to have you. Welcome to the show. We're just delighted to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you, Maynard. We really appreciate it. You three bring a lot of clarity to this subject, and I know it helps a lot of people, so thank you for what you're doing.
Well, we are trying. You are too kind. Mike, before we get started with Senator Landrieu, what would you tell us about what's going on in the markets?
Yeah, Maynard, today I was really going to talk about maybe what presidential politics was going to do for the markets, but you know what? I think it's a bit early for that, so we're really going to just kind of stick to the facts today of what's happened in the markets. And, first off, let's talk a little bit about bonds. Last week we had a really cooler than expected CPI print, and bonds plunged. Today, bonds are moving a little bit lower. We're down to 4.15 on the 10-year. The next stop, if economic stats keep printing cooler, is going to be 4.0, and I think that's created a little bit of this trading catalyst we've seen in the equity markets as of late. Now, as it relates to crude oil has been stuck in a sort of an 80 to 83 band for, it seems like weeks. We're trading today down about $1 to 81. I think the biggest issue for crude oil right now, bar issues with the dollar and stuff of that nature. I think what's going on right now is economic stats, particularly in areas like China, are just coming in weaker. So that's kind of weighing on crude oil at this point in time. And so I think that's just going to continue for the foreseeable future. I would just look past it. I think we're going to be stuck within the range. But the key point here is that supply is not the issue. Demand is the issue, and that's what markets are focused on right now. And we'll see how that develops. The interesting thing we wanted to talk about today from a commodity standpoint is natural gas. Natural gas is down to around $2.15 per M. It's plunged over the last week, 2 weeks, really last 4 or 5 weeks. We were up to around $3.15 an M maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we're down at $2.15 an M. And I think the interesting thing about that is that's despite basically Freeport LNG. Their facility was damaged during Hurricane Beryl. About 1.7 to 1.8 BCF has been off for a week or so. It's going to be coming back on very, very soon. But despite that, gas is down. The second reason why it's down, and is an issue that we've been talking about, is just natural gas production was at roughly 102, 103 BCF a day, say 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. Came down to around 98 to 99 BCF. Rebounded over the last couple of weeks back to 102, 103 BCF. It's over 100 BCF per day right now. We need that to come down because we have storage that's 18% above normal. Summer is quickly passing us by, and so we need hot weather throughout summer to really erode that natural gas surplus. So expect gas prices are going to stay low. However, it's probably a good time to be buying gas at these levels. I'd say as far as, the equity markets, I think the key word for equity markets is rotation. What you've seen, today we've seen the Dow is up around 700 points. Over the last 2 trading days this week, it's up around 900 points. And what we're seeing is the S&P is lagging. It's only up about 0.5% this week. The Nasdaq's actually down a little this week. The big tech stocks, the 6 AI and tech stocks are down 1.5% this week. And the Russell 2000 is up around 4.5% this week. And if you look at the last 5 trading days, the Russell 2000 is up 10 to 11%, and it's massively outperforming the S&P by about 900 basis points, and these AI tech stocks by about 1,300 basis points. So there is definitely rotation going on in the market, and I think that's a really good thing. It's one of the things we've said for the longest time is that the breadth of the market was so narrow, it's concentrated in only a handful of tech names, and it was a very dangerous market. That is now spreading to other areas, to other sectors, to smaller cap stocks, and that's simply because people think that rates are coming lower. And to be honest with you, I think some people are starting to think that you might have a president, Trump as a president going forward. What does that mean for the economy? He's probably for lower rates. He's probably for lower inflation. And that's a good thing for the bond market and probably for the equity market. So, that's the broader market. The last thing we want to really finish off with is this week we start basically Q2 earnings for the energy sector. We're going to have Liberty Energy and Kinder Morgan are going to be reporting on Wednesday, and we're going to have Halliburton and SLB reporting on Friday. And so I think what we're saying here is from an oil service standpoint, those stocks, especially North American oil service names since Q2 earnings reports, have generally gone sideways and down. It's because 2024 earnings revisions are generally going sideways and down. That's because the rig count and the frac count has moved lower over Q2. Now, the one thing we'd say is that, yeah, we're probably going to see revisions continue to go lower post the Q2 reporting, but these stocks have already taken a beating because people know revisions are going lower. So we expect a market reaction will be fairly muted. So that's what's going in the markets today, what we expect for the rest of the week. And so we'll hand it back to you, Maynard.
Arjun, anything you'd throw in as we get started today?
Yeah, thanks, Maynard. I just want to say that I am really excited to have our conversation with the senator today. As you know, I had the pleasure of hearing her speak this spring at a Columbia event, and it wasn't just the knowledge she displayed, but really the pragmatism. And it's one of those things, Maynard, I know we emphasize it at Verdin, we do on CBT, we do on Super Spiked, is how did energy sources ever become so divisive and partisan? It really, I find to be very illogical that the idea that oil and gas would somehow be, quote, Republican and renewables somehow be, quote, for Democrats. I think it's reasonable to debate the degree to which governments and public policy should fix perhaps shortfalls that come in markets and capitalism. And it's fair to debate how much we should focus on innovation and markets. It's a normal kind of debate, markets versus government. The idea that somehow that is devolved into we like or dislike fossil fuels, or the same thing from the other side about renewables, is something where this conversation really needs to be remade in a very different direction. We know, not just those of us that live in the US, but the entire world is going to need all forms of energy. And we also know that our country, the United States, is blessed. And I also throw in Canada as well, with crude oil and refined products that we can export. We're now the number one LNG exporter, but we can and should, and I think will someday be a leader in a lot of these new energies that countries like India and the rest of Southeast Asia are going to also want. They're not just going to want to be dependent on the US or OPEC for crude oil imports. They're going to want to crack the code on new technologies. And why shouldn't it be our companies? We know Silicon Valley, when it comes to technology, is the leading technology center. We know our capital markets are the leading capital markets in the world. So we have an opportunity as a country to truly do all of the above. Not all of the above, which is an excuse to produce fossil fuels, or not all of the above, meaning we're only going to do stuff. It is all of it that the world needs, and we have an opportunity to provide it. And I do think the senator, I'm really excited to have her with us today. I think there's a pragmatism that is missing in today's politics that I think she will bring to the conversation. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Maynard.
All right, well, let's jump right in. Senator, again, thank you so much for joining. We were talking a little bit before we got started here that full credit to Arjun. He had seen you speaking at an event and was so struck by how kind of thoughtful and centrist and balanced your remarks were around energy. He started grabbing the rest of us and saying, we've got to get the senator on COBT. So here you are. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, because I think I was maybe a little too blunt where I was. I'm not sure I'll be invited back to that venue. So I appreciate you having me here today. But no, it is important for us to just be clear-eyed and calm, use the facts, try to keep the focus on growing our economy, growing the economic pie, bringing prosperity and hope to our nation, rekindling that American dream. And you know, because you do the show, that energy is at the forefront of that debate. People don't always think of it in that way, but it might only be 7% of our economy, but it's the first 7%. And without it, nothing else exists. No products, no television, no anything. No power, no electricity, no air conditioning, no manufacturing, no gasoline for our cars, no electricity for our cars. So it's a complicated subject, but it is extremely important. So I like to talk about it because it is important. And I'm happy to share some ideas with you guys today.
Well, maybe one question, because I obviously referenced it. You're from Louisiana. Your family is a famous Louisiana family. But a lot of times these energy issues do have a lot to do with where you're from, right? And Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma people, for instance, who are around energy, understand it better, tend to view it a certain way. And if you live in a state that is not an energy producer, does not have a lot of heavy industry, has other industries, you just become detached from it. Do you find that to be an interesting kind of part of the problem, that your geography tends sometimes to guide how you think about energy?
Well, I think that is correct, but I would, quickly add, not only does Louisiana produce a lot of energy, but we use a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So our people know how to produce it and use it. And we're the only state in the union that uses 60% of our electric grid to support our industrial base. Our industrial base is one of the great industrial bases of this entire country. When I say we, I'm saying from Mobile to Houston, that industrial corridor on the Gulf Coast really is a backbone for so much of the economy of our nation. So I speak to this issue not just as a producer, happy when prices are high, because I'm not, because my people pay for a lot and use a lot. They need low prices. So I need stable prices. As a leader, I always push for clarity from the government, clarity on rules and regulations, clarity on, production and usage, clarity on goals, because my industry, my business, my workers appreciate that. And they do not appreciate being whipsawed back and forth. So that's why I got on the Energy Committee when I got to the Senate. Also, Bennett Johnston, who was the chair of the committee for many years, and my predecessor, strongly encouraged me to, and I learned to listen to him, and it served me well. So I got on the Energy Committee, served for 18 years, chaired it for the last 2 of my term. A big fan of Joe Manchin. Many of his staff that work with him now work with me, so we sort of feel like we're a family building this energy policy for the nation. The other thing I'll say about that committee that you all would appreciate and may not know, up until this point, that committee, under many chairmen, myself, Joe Manchin, Pete Domenici, Frank Murkowski, and I'm talking about the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, Bennett Johnston, and even back to Scoop Jackson, who I didn't, of course, serve with. It was before my time, but it's always been bipartisan. I mean, the energy bills that have come out have always been built like it should, with Republicans and Democrats. So that's the tradition of our committee. It's fraying right now. This country is so polarized, but I'm hoping that committee and the members of it can stay strong, because our country depends, like on bipartisan national security is better when it's done bipartisan, obviously. But energy policy should be bipartisan too, because it's so fundamental to our economy. So it's been why I've spent my time on it. Happy to talk more, but yeah, thank you. But Louisiana but more people now are paying attention to it, because gasoline prices are higher than people would like, and electricity prices in many states, like California, like Massachusetts, not Louisiana, not Oklahoma, are high enough, and people are saying, oh, why are our electricity prices high? Well, I can explain, you all can too, why they are higher, but we can talk about that.
It's interesting. Obviously, the country's been going through some inflation of late that we have not experienced in a long, long time. And for all the discussion that happens around inflation, I guess I'd say we're struck, or at least I'm struck by the fact that the energy component to prices is really not discussed as much as you might think it would be, particularly because we're all talking about inflation so much. Are you finding that? We should get into the Natural Allies effort and what you guys are doing, but are you finding energy costs and its link to inflation being something that people latch onto and can use as a bridge to a broader conversation?
Well, you all are more the experts in finance and economics than I am, and I'm not sure that I could comment on the details of that, but I will tell you that, energy prices go into everything that, whether it's the gasoline in your car or the medicines that you take or the, materials that you use. And we are very fortunate in the United States, although prices are high. We have our gas prices at the Henry Hub are the lowest. They're $2 a million cubic foot today, as opposed to $6 a couple of years ago. We have more oil, we have more gas, we have a great supply, which keeps our prices low. Democrats keeps our prices lower than other countries around the world. They're not low to our folks who want them lower. But when you look at what Europe is paying, for electricity prices, and for heaven's sakes, what they pay for gasoline, you should be happy to live in the United States. Now, that's my view. And as a Democrat, I'm for more production of oil and gas. I'm not a drill, baby, drill everywhere, every day. I'm for common sense, drill where you have a social license, like in Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, the Gulf of Mexico. We do not have to drill off the coast of San Francisco. We do not have to drill off the coast of Miami Beach, but we need to open up our resources. We have a lot of shale gas, a lot of shale oil. Let's get it cleaner. Let's expand renewables. And thank goodness the Congress finally came to its senses and passed a really amazing bill just last week called the Advanced Nuclear Act. And Republicans and Democrats have finally gotten in their head, oh my gosh, nuclear is clean and we know how to build it. And these are great jobs and our scientists know what the hell they're doing and it can be safer. And so that's very promising because, like Joe Manchin says, we need all of the above. And anybody that doesn't understand that simply does not understand math. It's science and math more than politics. It's math. It's just economic. This is how much energy demand is going up. This is how much, the density of hydrocarbons, how important that is, which you all can help explain to people that listen to this. And so we need more of the above, and we need a plan that can grow this economy and create good jobs in this country, high-paying jobs that people can make a living and a life. And that's what we work on.
I mentioned you were a three-term senator from Louisiana. That period where you were in office from 98 to 2016, that was the shale revolution. And so you saw so much during that period, including, us becoming an exporter again. It just amazing stuff. As you reflect on that period, what are some of the observations that you would make about how the energy discussion changed in there?
Oh, it was dramatic. And what disappoints me so much, which brings me to Natural Allies, which is why I'm so happy to co-chair this relatively new educational organization. We're not a lobbying organization. Our job is to try to educate and inform and enlighten mostly Democratic leaders in Congress, governors, grass tops, leaders about the benefits of an all of the above strategy and the benefits of what natural gas will do, what natural gas has done. And what natural gas has done in this country because of the shale revolution and thank God we have over 100-year supply of natural gas, and in more places, not just Louisiana and Texas, but in Dakotas, in West Virginia, in New York. People in New York don't want to believe they have natural gas, but they do, and Pennsylvania and Ohio, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, what we like to try to say to people is, we're so happy to have an abundance of natural gas. And because we've used natural gas more in the last 15 years since Paris, and instead of coal, the U.S. has led reductions of emissions, led Europe, led other people with all of the big talk in Europe about what they're going to do. They did not do better than we did. We did it. We reduced emissions by using natural gas instead of coal and by increasing our solar and our wind. Of course, President Biden has a lot of credit to be and vows to take there because of the investments that he's made, unprecedented investments through the IRA, and then the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act. They kind of all work together to create this really amazing opportunity. None of that would be possible without an abundance of oil and gas. And you're right. I can remember, Maynard, on the committee, I helped to usher through the first export license for Cheniere that was going to import gas because we were running out of it. And immediately, in a few years, because of the shale revolution, which was driven by the private sector, George Mitchell and his guys in Texas never gave up and found a way to do it. They found so much gas that now he changed, that whole company changed around and they became an exporter. And so now we're exporting gas, and thank God we are, because when Russia invaded the Ukraine, where in the heck was Germany going to get their gas from, or Poland, or Estonia, or any of these countries that are under Russia's thumb? We help send our gas there, and thank God. So it's a national security issue, and I don't understand why Democrats can't embrace this. It's the truth. It's not a bad thing to be for gas because it's helping to reduce emissions. And we say, the natural gas team that I'm on, we love renewables. We don't dislike them. We want to have more of them. But by their nature, they're intermittent. Wind only blows a certain number of hours a day. The sun only shines a certain hours a day. Ernie Moniz has told us, former Secretary of Energy, that one time he studied California, and I think they didn't have wind for something like, I don't know, like 41 days, a long time, without it. And what will you do? Just turn your lights off for 41 days? Ask the people in Houston how miserable their life has been without electricity for 5 days or 6. Can you imagine 41? So we say to people, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. We need more wind, more solar, but you have to have backup peaking power, which is natural gas, maybe one day more nuclear, and maybe one day battery technology, which you guys follow, and I'm sure know some great investments that are being made and smart investments in batteries. That will be wonderful. But today, natural gas is the backbone of our economy.
You mentioned nuclear. And nuclear is fascinating. It has all those great attributes you were referencing, but also it's fascinating because both Democrats and Republicans seem to love it. It's like one of a handful of things where they really agree. What do you make of that? How could we find more things where they agree? Mm-hmm. But it's just unique that nuclear has that space right now.
It is. It's very, very interesting. Republicans, I think, kind of came around to it. Not that they ever really left it. Democrats left it, but they came back around to it because I think they understand the technological advantage it gives us. And they are very aggravated, as they should be, about China's dominance. And so they kind of swung around back to nuclear. And then Democrats, really, it's sad, but they just have this mindset so much against fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, hydrocarbons, and they realize they need power from somewhere. So it's sort of by default, well, we really don't like nuclear, but we'll take it because it's low carbon. So it was kind of a combination of that. And I'm okay with that reasoning. I don't reject either of that. I'm just happy that both sides kind of came together, and then there's been an international push for it. And I'll tell you, Bill Gates has been amazing. When Bill Gates comes to this town and he talks to everybody, people listen to him because they know how smart he is, and he's very sincere when he puts his own money into it. And he's told everybody that, look, there's some new technologies, we can do this much safer. And, people listen to leaders they trust. And he had a big, breakthrough energies that he does, had a big impact on that. And then my mentor, Pete Domenici, he's deceased, but God rest his soul, he never gave up on it. And he kept every way he could, and his staff and others continue through his institute. So thank goodness, because we can have these small modular nuclears. And think about this, you guys, when AI comes, which is coming now, is here, and these data centers, where are they going to get their power? I mean, we have to think, well, maybe we should be building small modular nuclear, let them pay for it, get the price down. They can pay a little extra, Google, Amazon, etc. Let them pay that green premium and get us this whole new fleet of nuclear. And maybe we can place these in places in the country where, you know, you turn that power on, it stays on 24/7. It doesn't pollute. I mean, people have to be excited about this. If they can get over their fear of it, and we can explain how really kind of safe it is. So that's what my hope is. And then in the meantime, though, natural gas is really having a moment in the country, many more gas turbines, you know, utilities. I just had lunch last week with Dan Brule, former Secretary of Energy and a dear friend of mine, and from Louisiana. We're really proud of him. And he was former Secretary for President Trump. Now he runs EEI. And he said, you know, Mary, you know, for the whole decade, everybody would just talk about wind and solar. But now at our meetings, everybody's talking about gas. They have to, because it's the only place they can go to get power more quickly and have it less polluting and get emissions, keep emissions going down. So,
Senator, I'm really interested in your perspective on this. I think we've gone from a U.S. economy, a global economy over the last 100 years. It's been a fossil fuel-based economy. And a lot of people want to go to an electric economy like in 10 years, a decade. I want to get your perspective of, you know, just in Washington, D.C., do they understand how difficult this is? Do they understand, you know, how much it's going to cost to get us to where we want to be? And is there any flexibility to veer away from that mentality?
well, let me say the last thing first. I think there is growing flexibility because people are starting to understand the math and the science. People are also starting to ask themselves, oh, I wonder where electricity comes from. Like when you go all electric, where does electricity come from? Well, for 100 years, it came mostly from coal, as you know, or electricity. And that was not good for the environment, unabated coal. Now we're switching to gas and we're reducing, but you have to produce electricity from something, wood, coal, oil, you know, something, wind, solar, but you can't build enough solar plants everywhere or wind everywhere. Of course, some communities want it, some communities don't. Sometimes the sun shines a lot, sometimes it doesn't. Like, you know, look at Lamar Alexander, one of the great environmental and pro leaders of the Republican Party. He said, I don't want solar in the Smoky Mountains. Done, over with. We have no we have no wind in the Smoky Mountains, and you can't really much have solar in the Smoky Mountains because it's smoky. Smoky, but you know, it has covering. I mean, it doesn't have sun, you know, like we do. So, I mean, you got to have like something else, hydro, gas, etc. So, yeah, the answer is yes, it's changing because people are like, oh, my goodness, this is how electricity is made. And so I think we're going to hopefully an era of practical U.S.-led, not European-led, not United Nations-led, American-led global plan that includes all the above, but all technologies, getting emissions as low as possible, as quickly as possible, without jeopardizing either your economic viability or your national security. Now, if Democrats want to go down the road of jeopardizing economic viability and national security, you can go on without me. I will not follow. And I'm a Democrat, but that is a losing proposition to the people of this country. They want green, they want clean, but they want their jobs first, and they want to make sure that we're safe so that nobody can invade us like Russia invaded the Ukraine. And anybody that mistakes that in politics will be short-lived, in my view, in their political view, even people from California and Massachusetts. Those days are coming shortly for them. But the middle part of this country is pretty much getting that, like people in Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, Dakota, Texas, and more in Ohio and Pennsylvania. They're like, okay, we want green, but we want good jobs, we want strong economies, and we like wind, we like solar, but we can't go all electric wind and solar too fast, or we'll put ourselves in the position that Europe has put itself in, where it's, it's degrowing, it's not growing economically, and their industrial base is shrinking, and they better watch out.
Senator, those are really powerful comments, and I actually want to build upon some of that. I think one of the most dramatic changes within all of our collective lifetimes has been from the 1970s, when we were hugely dependent on Middle East oil imports. And I am old enough to remember the odd even license plates my parents when they were filling up cars, to now being in a position where crude oil, we're generally balanced on our imports and exports. We export refined products to the world. And we've gone from negligible natural gas exports to now being the number one LNG exporter as of 2023, higher than Qatar or Australia. And I think a lot of credit and a lot of that change happened in your time as a senator during your third term. That's when we got the export ban lifted, President Obama's second term, and really was a very important development for the growth of shale and the strength of our country to be able to now provide exports to the world. My question for you, Senator, is we all know that whoever's president, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, when energy prices go up, and that can always happen, it's a cyclical business, you have outages, you have demand surprise, and if oil or natural gas prices go up, I am nervous that whether it's a Republican or Democrat, whatever time period it is, that exports is one of those things that could be on the chopping block, that there'll be a temptation that we should, quote, keep it for America. It's not quite how global markets work, but we've already spent a lot of time talking about how maybe a lot of the world isn't fully educated on this stuff. Could you talk about the resiliency of our ability to export as a country? Can it withstand future price cycles? And how do we ensure there is sufficient education out there that American people and the world benefits from us exporting both oil and LNG and other products and new technologies, as you correctly mentioned as well?
No, you raise a very important point. And, and that would be kind of a natural reaction. If prices start going up, people would say, well, heavens, why don't we keep our own oil and gas here for ourselves? Our prices will go lower. But, the markets work in reverse of that. The more you open up markets, the more the supply is driven. People will be, incentivized to find more oil and gas, and prices will remain stable. But that's hard argument to make in a tough time. So two things I want to say. One, that's what Natural Allies is doing right now. And PAGE, our sister organization called Partnership to Address Global Emissions, led by Toby Rice and EQT, really amazing young corporate leader in our country, the Rice brothers. They're quite famous in this field. Anyway, he's leading PAGE, and Alan Armstrong and Enbridge, and Alan Armstrong with Williams and Enbridge and TC, and our labor union partners, and NAM. We got Jay Timmons involved, and we're going to ask the Restaurant Association to help us talk to America about how important it is to keep that supply of oil and gas up and exports open. I do want to give credit to one of my colleagues who deserves credit. And you're right, it was President Obama. People forget it was a Democrat that opened up the export of crude oil, because we were producing so much of this sweet crude from the Dakotas, and we didn't really have any place to put it. And people say, well, how is that? You have a lot of refineries. Well, we refine heavy crude product. And it's just the way our refineries grew up. It's a long story. But anyway, Heidi Heitkamp, Senator Heitkamp, who lost her election, but she was a true champion. And she was the one that helped me start Natural Allies. She's now working at a different job. But Heidi really led that on the Democratic side, and her, her strength and her leadership help get that crude oil export open. So now we can produce, all kinds of different kinds of oils in our country, and we can use a lot of it domestically, depending on how our industry needs it. And then we can export some of this cleaner oil around the world. Same thing for gas. So it's a matter of education and programs like this that help people understand, nope, if you want to have, more of anything, keep the taxes low on it and open up your markets, and it'll go. And we need more of it. And then we really have to work with the industry to reduce methane emissions, carbon capture and sequestration. But the industry itself, led by Alan Armstrong, which is why I'm proud to work with him and his team. He said, Mary, I'm going to make Williams the first, net zero, oil pipe transport company. And I wish the Democrats would do a better job of respecting the industry and understanding how many smart people they have. These engineers, they don't care about politics. You just tell them what you want. They'll figure it out. Like, that's what engineers do. That's why they go to school, to be an engineer. They don't even like politics. You just tell them, look, you built this pipeline and the stuff's coming out. Keep it in. Okay, I can do that. And they'll come back to you in about 30 days and tell you this is how it can be done and this is how much it's going to cost. They can do it. And I know they can. So I trust the industry. I'm not forgiving them for everything they did in the past. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the past. I'm interested in how we go forward today, now, and help this country win this economic race that we're in against China, keep Russia at bay, build our technology, and help create the kind of manufacturing jobs that I think people in Ohio and Pennsylvania would like to have again. And I know people in Louisiana want to keep what we have, and we have quite a few of them. We're not giving them up. And I can't do that with wind and solar. I'm sorry. I cannot keep a manufacturing base in my state alive with wind and solar. It can be a part of it, but I need something either nuclear, gas, or cleaner burning coal, unless y'all have a better idea.
Can I maybe just jump in on Arjun's theme there about exports? You spoke out directly and forcefully when the Biden administration inserted a pause around permitting and raised some of the questions around all that. Would you mind just summarizing quickly for our audience kind of what your take was on that and what your comments to the administration were on that?
Well, I have many things to say, but I'll start with my favorite comment made by Senator Lisa Murkowski, who's one of my dear friends and former chair of the committee. And, she and I work so closely together. And in the hearing of oversight to ask the administration why in the heck they did that, her question was, let me just ask you, Mr. Secretary, the Assistant Secretary was, of course, present at the table. She said, were our allies in Europe as surprised as we were when you told them about this ban? Like, it came out of nowhere. It just came out of nowhere. And here we are exporting, tons and tons of liquefied gas. I mean, I've got 6,000 people working at the Venture Global plant in Plaquemine. I've got 6,000 people at the Venture Global plant in Cameron. We have the Freeport plant, the Cheniere plant, Sempra. I mean, these companies. These are hugely positive impacts to our economic base in our region, but they're in other places in the country too. We just cite them quicker in the Gulf Coast because we're used to this kind of work, and our workers know how to do this well. And it just came out of nowhere. Like, for what reason? And then when you ask them the reason, they gave some kind of really weak political argument, which was inappropriate and not correct. And if they would have given an economic argument or a scientific argument, but they quoted a study that's been it's really been dismissed, one study by one scientist from, I think, Princeton, but we have many other scientists that can, and economists that can show, and actually we're getting ready to roll out a study done by ICCF next week in Washington that's going to debunk that and show that this is in America's economic interest. And this isn't like about Louisiana and Texas. This is about Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, the heartland, about getting enough gas to them to keep this manufacturing renaissance alive for many parts of our country. So I was critical. I still am. I think it was a mistake. I hope it's reversed. I think it will be, but won't be until after the election if President Biden wins, and if President Trump wins again, it will definitely be reversed. But I think even if President Biden wins, I think he's received so many comments from such a wide spread of people like, what are you doing? I mean, we need to export more, not less. We have it. It creates good jobs here, and it's replacing coal mostly around the world. So what's wrong with this? But what we really have to do, if people are serious about global emissions, and that's a question, if people are really serious about reducing emissions or just eliminating fossil fuels, because I think some of the left is so they just have this idea in their head that fossil fuels are horrible, that they've lost sight of the goal. It's reducing emissions. We have to come up with a plan to help China and India stop building coal plants. That's what they're doing. Now, I don't have the plan yet. I've been thinking about it. When I come up with it, I will share it with you guys. But somebody better be thinking about this and how to, help these African nations use their hydrocarbon assets, like Ghana, which is a great example. They've raised the whole standard of living for their whole country, and how to do it as cleanly as possible so that we can mitigate the negative effects of our emissions from hydrocarbons. So y'all give that some thought. Let me know.
Well, let me maybe ask you one question while we're right there on that topic. I think one of the experiences we've had as we've talked to developing country energy experts is that the World Bank and organizations like that, they sort of toggle politically, and sometimes they are willing to finance fossil fuel projects, and sometimes they are not. And of course, the terrible irony is when gas pipelines don't get built, people just use wood, or they don't have energy, or there's lots of bad things that happen. So it's not helping the environment. Do you have any insight into the World Bank and organizations like that, and how we could get them to be more practical?
You're absolutely right. And it really has been just alarming for me to watch. And I'm, this is critical of the Democratic Party, but I just need to be, and I'm critical of the Republican Party when I think they're wrong. But for Democrats to, claim that they are for lifting people out of poverty, and it's sort of the central focus of our party, lifting people out of poverty. I believe they do a pretty poor job of it when it comes to policies in these developing nations, because nothing lifts people out of poverty faster than an energy economy, hydrocarbons, helping people get electricity, power from manufacturing. And there is no current substitute that meets the economic test. Now, could nuclear do that? Yes, but we're a far way from building a huge nuclear power plant in the middle of Kenya. Maybe I'm wrong, or Tanzania, maybe I'm wrong, but we just got one built in Georgia, and it took us everything we could, and we're the United States. So do we just want people to just burn wood and coal? Meanwhile, the women have to walk the miles to the, up mountains to get the wood, and then down again. That's what they spend their whole life doing, hauling wood and water. Is that what we want people to do? No, I'm not that. So I am for using everything we have as cleanly as we can, partnering with our good technological experts in the US, and not let, and become, and we are the energy dominant country of the world. Now, I will say this. I also think we should be smart and be friends with countries like the Emirates. I just got back from COP. I know the ambassador of the United States from the Emirates. I was extremely impressed with what I saw there. I know that they're a big oil and gas country, and I know the history of it. But what they have built in 30 or 40 years, from literally tents and camels in the desert to the most amazing city I've ever seen with my own eyes, the most amazing buildings I've ever seen. I'm just it was breathtaking. And yes, they built it on oil and gas. So what? It's lifting people out of poverty, giving people hope. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people are being employed from the most poor countries in the world. Yes, they need a lot of reforms and this and that. But what do Democrats want? They just want people to just live with one light bulb, and it only works, a few hours a day. And while we travel around in our yachts and our airplanes and turn on our electricity or turn it down to 67 when we get a little uncomfortable in our homes. That's baloney to me. And it's really borders on, it just borders beyond arrogance. So I'm pretty much on a tear on this. And for Republicans, I'll say, because I'm just as angry with them sometimes, stop this, putting your head in the sand on climate. We are affecting the climate. We can figure our way out of this. So I'm like supporting people like John Curtis, who's who's just he's going to be the new senator from Utah. I'm supporting him. I'm a Democrat. He's a Republican, but he had the bravery and courage to create the climate solution, the conservative climate solution caucus. He has 90 members of the House that are conservative Republicans that have said, we will be for climate solutions as long as they follow a more conservative approach, not heavy regulation, not heavy tax, lighter touch, guidance, market-driven approach. So we can find some common ground. And I think this is hopeful. So I get mad at Republicans that are deniers, but he's not. And we're helping to build. That's another thing I do with Climate Solutions Foundation is I created with Carlos Cabello. We've built these, helped to build these bipartisan coalitions in the House and the Senate that are committed to finding solutions. Are solutions easy to find? No. Is it, is everybody as brave as they should be every day? No. But you know what? It's a start and we can work with it.
We're lucky enough to visit with John Curtis here, I guess it was about a month ago, and we really enjoyed it. And I was thinking as you were talking, Senator, the quote conservative Democrat and the quote moderate Republican, those two animals, are we making more of them? Are more of them coming? Because I think everybody likes those two flavors of animals generally, the centrist world. And in some ways they're going away, and in some ways that we're getting more of them. What do you think of that species and the outlook for the species?
Well, the outlook for the energy species is somewhat bright because I'm helping to curate it. And it's not just me, but I have many partners. That's what Natural Allies does. That's what Climate Solutions does. That's what many of our partners in the city that we've, just reaching out, please help, please help, please help. No sharp elbows, everybody. We're building that like a reef, if you will, of Democrats and Republicans that will at least open their minds a little bit. Focus on the math. Like Jason Grimay, one of my favorite leaders in this, says the problem in Washington, and he captures it well. He says Republicans don't accept the science and Democrats don't accept the math. And until we get both, parties to accept those, we're not going to make progress. So that's kind of our guiding principle. Go to Republicans, explain the science. Go to Democrats, explain the math, the economic math, and see if we can find a way forward. But I am in this polarized environment. It is frustrating and frightening, honestly, at times. And that's why I spend my time on this, because it's something I know, something I trust Americans to figure out. And if we just work, I think if we work hard enough and keep working in good spirit, like with John Curtis, like with Andrew Garbarino, another great Republican leader, like Chrissy Houlihan on the Democratic side, like Scott Peters on the Democratic side. And we keep pulling them together and helping them find language. I think we're making progress. And I'll point to the nuclear bill as an example, not that we can take credit, but that is a good example of what happens when kind of we keep pushing and all of a sudden it went. So maybe the same thing could happen on gas. Maybe the same thing can happen on preserving some of the IRA tax credits, even if Trump would be elected. I don't think he should wholesale do away with that. I mean, the red states. I mean, they're having a lot of investments in Trump states from the IRA. So he would be foolish to do away with it. I know he's going to, that's what he says he's going to do. Whether he does it or not, I don't know. But I hope there'll be enough Republicans to stand up and business leaders to say, hey, wait a minute, we're making a lot of money. We're putting a lot of people to work. We're cleaning the environment. What's wrong with that?
The other thing that's pretty incredible that happened over the last few years is we drew down the SPR. And you know, for all those years in the Senate, knew what a critical piece of our security, at least how we thought about the use of the SPR. I'm just curious, that was a pretty dramatic drawdown we had of the SPR. It's not something that gets talked about a lot, but what do you have a view on how quickly we ought to refill it, or what we did with it? It's really a different use of the SPR than I think
was ever intended. And I think you all can help me with these numbers, because I think it's important for people to understand the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a group of caverns where we literally keep enough oil to keep us from being shocked by any adversary that would want to cut off our supplies, so that we can, you know, it's like you don't want your oxygen cut off. You can't really live much without it. So you want to like have maybe an oxygen machine if you need it in your house. That's kind of what it is, like a backup. But how much of it do we have? Isn't it only like 30 days supply? Do y'all know what it is normally?
I want to say 30 days. I
think it's 30 days is what we try to keep in reserve, 30 days of what the U.S. would need. So think about that. That's not that many days to have to figure out how to get out of your emergency. So the idea is you want to keep as much there when it's a real emergency. And I think what President Biden did when the price went up, and it does, it goes up and down, and it aggravates the heck out of people, and they don't understand why, and it makes them all mad. But he released some, and now I think we're down to maybe half of those days. So eventually you want to fill that back up, but really you only want to use it for an emergency, not to mitigate against price inflections. Your policies should do that and keep, like I said, open markets, more exploration, with carbon sequestration, with methane reduction, with a focus on reducing emissions, and that will help stabilize prices. I think the best. But you all tell me, I mean, you're the economist. Is that what you're offering as a suggestion?
No, I think on this SPR question, it was just such a new and different use of the SPR to try to affect prices. And we are, I think your numbers are right. I think we are sitting at roughly half of what we had been sitting at. And as a large producer now, you can probably say we don't need as much on hand in storage as maybe we used to, but still you're talking about the defense of the country and an insurance policy. And so, you know, refilling it or filling it up does seem like a good idea. Mike, let me just turn back to you.
Yeah, before I ask you that question, what I will say to that point is that I think things are different when you're a 5 million barrel per day producer versus a 13 million a day producer. And so I think people get caught up in the absolute numbers or levels of the SPR as opposed to what is the net imports that we have on a daily basis. And when you look at it that way, we need a heck of a lot less SPR, you know, out there, given where we are from a net basis. So I just say that first. And so it's not as low as you think it is from a net basis.
No, that's true. And the great news is, while we probably want to have a reserve, I mean, you could argue what is the proper amount given how much we produce. And we have reserves in our pipelines. We have reserves in our reserves. You know, I mean, oil companies know where a lot more oil is sometimes than what they might report, because they report certain things and then they claim certain things as reserves. But we have a lot more resource than even we have accounted for on the books, I think, is the way I would say it. And the why I think that is because when I was chair of the committee, every time I would ask the Department of Energy to look to see if they'd find more oil, they always found it. But when you're not looking, you're not finding it. So if you're not opening up some of this federal land, which they're closing more and more, most of this production is happening on private land, which is another benefit of the U.S. I mean, think about how amazing this is. This is private land development. This isn't government run like they run it in Russia or they run it in China. This is private sector land. Private sector people are making decisions. Do I want to produce oil and gas on my land? And this is how I want to do it. And this is what I get paid. Lots of people are making money, not just the oil companies, but all the restaurants in town, all of the landowners, all of the little shops that, service all of the work that's done. So, yeah, but you all will know the number, but you're right. We probably don't need as much as we had before, but we should only use it for emergencies, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think my question for you, Senator, second question is that we've heard a lot about permitting reform, right? And it seems like there's just a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. Is that the correct read on my part? And, what do you think that we have to do both at a, federal and state level to really, because if we're really going to go to an electric economy, we're going to really have to get in front of this permitting reform like yesterday. What is the status of where you think we are right now, and where do we need to be, say, in the state of Louisiana and just in the whole U.S. in, say, the next 4 or 5 years?
Well, the short answer is you're right. There's a lot of talk and not so much action, but there are a lot of smart people on both the Republican and Democratic side looking hard at this. The problem is we're too close to an election, and there's just too much uncertainty. So my take is that nothing will be done on this seriously until after the election, potentially in a lame duck. If Joe Biden is not reelected and Donald Trump is, there could potentially be a movement before Donald Trump takes office. But if Donald Trump is elected, I think there's going to be a big effort on permitting reform, but I'm not sure it will get bipartisan support, because sometimes the Republicans get ahead of steam and they try to move too much too fast, and they just can't get it through whatever Democratic opposition there is. But the bottom line is we need more natural gas pipelines. We need to reduce the barriers to building those, like section the clean water section that allows any state or any county to veto a pipeline under the guise of using the Clean Water Act, which was never intended for that purpose. If you think a pipeline coming through your creek or your river is going to disrupt that, then you show the evidence and go take it to FERC, and FERC will decide. But without evidence, without anything, they just jerk the permit. And you can't have a country if you can't lay pipelines from one state to the next. So that's what, I'm sorry to say, but I'm going to call him out, Governor Cuomo. He stopped pipelines going into New York. Now they're wondering where they're going to get the power that New York needs for any of these AI or data centers to be placed in upstate New York. They simply don't have enough power. They don't get enough hydro from Canada. They don't get enough gas in their pipelines, and they won't put up transmission lines. So it's like you can't just wave a magic wand. People have to be practical. So we need more transmission lines, which a lot of people don't like the way they look. People don't like gas pipelines. Well, you got to like something, or we're not going to have enough power. And that's the issue. And the other complication of it is it's not just up to the federal government. Remember, the federal government has rules and regs, but then every state, their public service commission, and their power commissioners have to decide how to lay a lot of this stuff. So all I say is, Lord help us, because it's complicated. But we do have to build our way out of it. You can't just stop building and hope that this problem is going to go away. To reduce emissions, grow our economy, we have to build infrastructure faster than we're doing, faster.
Senator, this has been spectacular. We really appreciate it. We know it's not easy to be that voice. Sometimes when your friends are saying, what do you mean? You're saying you disagree with this? But that kind of voice and that kind of courage, the country needs more of that. And we were so lucky to have you as a senator for 18 years, and we're all lucky to have you now at Natural Allies and doing and speaking all the things you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys, and I'm just grateful to Tim Ryan and Kendrick Meek and Mayor Nutter, who are my co-chairs on Natural Allies, and so grateful for the group of, pipeline companies and labor unions and pipe contractors and others that put this voice together so we can go and just give the facts. And, like I said, if we could just drop the political rhetoric and just focus on the math, the science, and the economics of this, for our country and what people really need, then I think we'll be better off. Let's hope that happens. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks, everybody.